Alright, squad, let's dive into the wild ride that is the opening of A Wrinkle in Time. Imagine the vibe, a stormy night, family drama, and some major sci-fi energy brewing in the background. You're about to meet some iconic characters and get pulled into a story that's basically like stepping into an alternate dimension. Ready? Let's go. So, we kick things off with Meg Murry. Picture her, a total mood of a teenager, awkward, insecure, and mad at the world because life is out here being unfair. It's a dark and stormy night, yeah, literally, and Meg is holed up in her attic room, spiraling about how much her life sucks. She's got braces, she's struggling in school, and the teachers won't stop comparing her to her super smart twin brothers, Sandy and Denny's. To top it all off, people in town won't stop gossiping about how her dad's been MIA for over a year. Like, can't a girl have some peace? But Meg isn't just some emo teen wallowing in self-pity. She's sharp and loyal, especially when it comes to her fam downstairs. Her little brother Charles Wallace is waiting. This kid? Straight up genius. Like, think Baby Yoda levels of cute and mysterious, but with big brain energy. Everyone else thinks he's weird because he doesn't talk much around strangers, but Meg knows he's a legend. He just doesn't waste his words on people who won't get him. Big respect. Anyway, Charles Wallace has this eerie ability to sense things, like, he knows Meg needs a pep talk before she even says anything. So they head down to the kitchen, and their mom is there, casually making a midnight snack like the literal queen she is. Meg's mom, by the way, is a whole scientist. Not like I just Google stuff scientist, she's legit brilliant and drop-dead gorgeous, the kind of mom who could probably run the world if she wasn't busy trying to hold her family together while her husband is AWOL. As they're chilling in the kitchen, things take a turn for the weird. A random old lady just walks into their house like it's no big deal. Her name is Mrs. Whatsit, and she looks like someone who might be leading a rogue D&D campaign in her spare time, wild clothes, weird vibes, and zero explanation for why she's there. Instead of freaking out, Charles Wallace is totally cool with her, like, yeah, this is normal for us. Meg's mom? Slightly concerned but still polite because that's how she rolls. Mrs. Whatsit drops some cryptic comments about a tesseract and dips before anyone can get answers. Meg is like, what the heck is a tesseract? But her mom goes pale, which means it's something serious. Turns out, the tesseract is tied to her dad's disappearance. This is where things start feeling like the setup to a mystery quest. You can almost hear the new mission unlocked sound in the background. The next day, Charles Wallace decides they need to pay a visit to the haunted house on the edge of town, where Mrs. Whatsit is apparently crashing. Meg is not thrilled, but she's too curious to say no. Tagging along is Calvin O'Keefe, a high school junior who randomly shows up and decides to join their squad. Calvin is tall, popular, and smooth-talking, but don't let the surface fool you, this dude is actually sweet and a little lonely, and he clicks with Meg and Charles Wallace like they're long-lost party members in an RPG. When they reach the spooky house, things get even weirder. Inside, they meet Mrs. Who, another eccentric old lady who's clearly in on whatever secret Mrs. Whatsit is hiding. Mrs. Who has a thing for quoting famous lines from literature and philosophy, which is cool but also kind of confusing. Like, she's dropping Socrates quotes while Meg is just trying to figure out what's going on. Calvin is straight up amazed, though. He's like, I thought I was here for a haunted house tour, and now it feels like I stumbled into a cosmic conspiracy. Before they leave, Mrs. Who drops some hints about the big picture. Something about Meg's dad being trapped, the universe being in danger, and how they're all part of a bigger plan. It's the kind of moment where you can tell things are about to get epic, even if no one fully understands the stakes yet. Later, Meg and Calvin have a bonding moment while walking home. Calvin opens up about how his life isn't as perfect as it seems, his family is huge, chaotic, and mostly ignores him. Meg feels seen for the first time, like maybe being a misfit isn't the worst thing in the world. There's a subtle, are they catching feelings? Vibe, but it's not overly sappy. Just two teens realizing they might not be as alone as they thought. The next day, the squad regroups, and Charles Wallace reveals that it's time to meet the third member of the weird trio, Mrs. Witch. They gather in the woods, where the three mysterious ladies are waiting. Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who are there, along with Mrs. Witch, who doesn't have a physical form but speaks in this echo-y, glitchy way, like she's a hologram with bad Wi-Fi. The ladies finally spill the tea, there's a massive dark force called the Black Thing, and it's spreading across the universe, snuffing out light and hope wherever it goes. Meg's dad got caught up in it while working on some top-secret science experiment involving tesseracts, which are basically shortcuts through space and time. Think Doctor Strange portals, but way more complicated. The squad's mission? Rescue Meg's dad and help fight the Black Thing. No pressure or anything, right? The kids are like, wait, we're just regular people, but the ladies are all, nah, you've got potential. Trust the process. And before they can protest, boom, they're tessering. Tessering, by the way, is basically teleportation but on a cosmic scale. It's like fast travel in a video game, except way more disorienting. 1 second they're in the woods, and the next, they're on another planet. And that's where we leave them, on the brink of a full-blown adventure, with Meg trying to keep up, Charles Wallace being his cryptic genius self, and Calvin realizing he's signed up for way more than he bargained for. The stakes are sky high, the squad is assembled, and the universe is counting on them. No big deal, right? Stay tuned, things are about to get wild. Alright, buckle up, because chapters 4 and 5 of A Wrinkle in Time are where the story hits warp speed, literally. Picture this, Meg, Charles Wallace, and Calvin just got yeeted through space and time by the cosmic trio of Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. Like, imagine your favorite RPG suddenly turns into a space travel DLC, and you have no clue how to play. That's where the squad's at right now. So, they land on this planet called Uriel, which is basically paradise mode, rolling hills, crystal clear air, and vibes so chill you can almost hear lo-fi beats playing in the background. But wait, it gets even cooler. Mrs. Whatsit casually transforms into this majestic, winged centaur-like creature. Like, imagine a Studio Ghibli character brought to life. Meg is completely mind-blown because, hello, her reality just did a backflip, and now her guide is a literal space angel. They climb onto Mrs. Whatsit's back, and she takes them on a flight over Uriel. At first, it's all beautiful skies and breathtaking landscapes, like a dream sequence in an anime. But then, boom, everything gets dark. Mrs. Whatsit shows them the black thing, a massive, shadowy cloud stretching across the sky. It's straight up terrifying, like a final boss battle you're not even close to ready for. The black thing is what's wrecking the universe, swallowing up planets and spreading despair. And, oh yeah, Meg's dad is stuck somewhere in all that mess. Talk about stakes. Meg is freaking out, big mood, honestly, but Mrs. Whatsit gives her some reassurance. She tells Meg that their dad fought the black thing and hasn't given up. Charles Wallace is doing his usual quiet genius thing, soaking it all in, while Calvin looks like he's realizing he signed up for a way bigger quest than he expected. The squad's learning that this isn't just about finding Meg's dad, it's about standing up to a cosmic-level evil that's out here ruining lives. After that dramatic reveal, it's time to Tesseract again. Tesseract travel, if you forgot, is like getting slingshot through dimensions. It's not exactly a smooth ride, imagine trying to glitch your way through a wall in a video game, but with your entire body. This time, they land on a planet that's all gray and barren. No chill vibes here, just straight up dystopia. Mrs. Whatsit explains that not every world can fight off the black thing. Some planets get totally wrecked, and this one's clearly seen better days. But the squad doesn't stay long because Mrs. Who and Mrs. Which have other plans. They start explaining how tessering works, and it's like a crash course in sci-fi physics. Meg's trying to keep up, but let's be real, it's a lot. They break it down like this, tessering is folding space and time so you can travel between points instantly. Imagine drawing two dots on a piece of paper, then folding the paper so the dots touch. Boom, that's tessering. Calvin is like, whoa, mind blown, while Meg's brain is halfway fried. She's trying her best, though, because her dad figured this out, so it's gotta be important. And speaking of her dad, the Mrs. WS start dropping some cryptic hints about why he's missing. Turns out, he was part of a group of scientists working on tessering, but something went wrong. He ended up trapped on a sketchy planet controlled by the black thing. The Mrs. WS won't give them the full 411 yet, classic NPC move, but they promise the squad will get answers soon. Now, here's where things get deep. The Mrs. WS explained that the universe isn't just random chaos. There's a battle going on between light and darkness, good and evil. It's like every epic anime ever, but instead of swords and mechs, this fight's about love, courage, and all that good stuff. They name drop some major players on Team Light, think Jesus, Buddha, and other icons who've inspired people to resist darkness. Meg is shook. She's realizing this isn't just about her family, it's about something way bigger. The Mrs. WS also give the kids some key advice. They're like, you've got strengths you don't even realize yet, and you're gonna need them for what's ahead. Meg, of course, doesn't believe it. She's stuck in that I'm a hot mess mindset, but Charles Wallace and Calvin are hyping her up. Calvin, especially, is starting to show his soft side, and there's definitely a spark between him and Meg. It's not over-the-top romantic, just sweet and genuine, like a bond forming under fire. Before the squad can even process all this, it's time for their next tesser. The Mrs. WS warn them that where they're going is dangerous, but they don't say much else. Classic mysterious mentor move. Meg's nervous, Charles Wallace is calm as ever, and Calvin is trying to play it cool. They hold onto each other as they get flung into the unknown, ready, or maybe not, for whatever comes next. And that's where we leave them, 3 kids, a cosmic evil, and a whole lot of unanswered questions. The stakes? Through the roof. The vibes? Immaculate. This adventure is just getting started, and it's already legendary. Alright, let's jump back into the galaxy brain chaos that is A Wrinkle in Time, because chapters 6 through 8 are where things go from whoa, this is trippy to wait, is this the end of humanity? We've got secret plans, major drama, and a villain that's straight out of your creepiest nightmares. So grab your emotional support plushie, and let's do this. The gang, Meg, Calvin, and Charles Wallace, are now fully locked into their rescue mission, and the stakes keep climbing. Their intergalactic road trip brings them to this eerie-as-heck planet called Camazotz, which is the Black Thing's evil headquarters. The vibe here is less welcome to the galaxy, and more welcome to the dystopian cult of conformity. As soon as they arrive, the kids notice something is super off. Picture a suburban neighborhood, but creepily perfect, all the houses look the same, all the kids bounce their balls in sync, and everyone seems weirdly robotic. It's like someone cranked up the Stepford Wives energy and set it on nightmare mode. Calvin, bless him, tries to rationalize what's going on, but Meg is not having it. She's all I don't care if this is Alien SimCity, we need to find my dad. Charles Wallace, meanwhile, is eerily calm, which, let's be real, is always a red flag with this kid. He's got those big genius vibes, but sometimes it's like he knows too much, and it's kind of unsettling. Anyway, they decide to investigate, and that's when they hear about Central Intelligence. No, it's not a bad spy movie title, it's the government-style HQ that basically controls the entire planet. And guess what? That's where Meg's dad is being held. Of course, they have to go there, because where else would a secret science prisoner be locked up? On their way, things start getting weirder, if that's even possible. They meet a guy with red eyes who's serving Major Final Boss energy. He's sitting in the sterile room, all cool and composed, and immediately starts trying to mind control the kids. Like, no small talk, just look into my eyes and obey me. Red eyes, because honestly, does this dude even have a real name, is basically a mouthpiece for IT, the giant, evil brain that's running the whole planet. Yes, IT is literally a brain, but we'll get to that. For now, just know that Red Eyes is like IT's PR guy, and he's creepy as heck. Charles Wallace, being the big brain kid he is, tries to flex on Red Eyes by resisting the mind control powers. Bad move, because Red Eyes just cranks up the psychic manipulation like he's playing on nightmare difficulty. Before you know it, Charles Wallace is completely under his control. Yep, our boy just turned into a villain NPC, and it's heartbreaking. Meg is losing it, screaming at him to fight back, but Charles is acting all smug and weird, like I'm fine, actually. This is just how it is now. Calvin's trying to calm Meg down, but you can tell he's panicking too. At this point, Charles Wallace starts leading them deeper into the heart of Central Intelligence. He's totally possessed, acting like a tour guide for this dystopian horror show. Meg's furious and scared, and she's throwing every insult she can think of to try to snap him out of it, but it's no use. Charles is fully under IT's control, and it's like watching your favorite party member turn into a boss fight mid-game. Absolute betrayal vibes. Eventually, they reach this giant, creepy dome where IT lives. And, oh boy, IT is next level terrifying. Imagine the grossest brain you've ever seen, but massive and pulsating like it's about to explode. IT doesn't speak in words, it just sends waves of pure fear and despair straight into your head. Meg's trying to stay strong, but it's like she's getting hit with psychic attacks every second. Calvin is holding it together better than expected, mostly because he's channeling every ounce of his charisma to resist IT's influence. But Meg? She's barely hanging on. And then, IT pulls out its ultimate weapon, the rhythm. No, I'm not kidding. IT starts using this horrible, pounding rhythm to try to sync their brains with its control. It's like the ultimate cursed metronome, and it's impossible to ignore. Meg realizes that if she gives in, even for a second, she'll lose herself completely. But then she remembers something, her own anger. Yeah, Meg's anger, the thing she's always been told is a weakness, is actually her secret weapon. She channels all her rage into resisting IT's control, and it works, at least for now. Meanwhile, Calvin's trying to reason with Charles Wallace, who's still acting like IT's #1 fan. Calvin's like, bro, you're better than this. Remember who you are. But Charles isn't budging. He's all, you just don't understand the bigger picture. It's giving major anime villain speech energy, and honestly, it's tragic. You can tell there's still a part of Charles Wallace that's fighting, but IT's grip is too strong. Just when it feels like all hope is lost, they find Meg's dad. Yep, he's alive, but he's been trapped in this weird, transparent prison cube. Meg's relief is off the charts, finally, the whole reason she's been risking her life is right there in front of her. But, of course, breaking him out isn't going to be easy. IT is not about to let them waltz out with one of its prisoners, and Charles Wallace is still playing for the wrong team. Meg's dad tries to explain what's been happening, but there's no time for a full debrief. They're in the middle of enemy territory, and IT is coming at them hard. Calvin's trying to strategize, Meg's panicking, and her dad is trying to figure out how to save them all without getting them killed. It's total chaos, but somehow they manage to pull Meg's dad out of the cube. Finally, a win. Except, not really, because Charles Wallace is still trapped under IT's control, and IT is getting stronger by the second. In a desperate move, Meg's dad tessers them out of there. Remember tessering? The whole folding space and time thing? Yeah, that. He doesn't have the Mrs. WS to guide him, so the tesser is rough, like, we might not survive this rough. When they land, Meg realizes something's wrong. She's cold, weak, and barely conscious. And Charles Wallace? Still stuck back on Camazotz, still controlled by IT. The squad is battered, broken, and nowhere near done. They've saved Meg's dad, but the cost is huge. And as much as Meg wants to scream and cry, she knows they have to go back for Charles. The fight isn't over, it's just beginning. Okay, so chapters 9 and 10 of A Wrinkle in Time are straight-up emotional roller coasters with a side of existential crisis. Meg and her squad, Calvin and her dad, are out here trying to pick up the pieces after their epic fail on Camazotz. Like, they saved her dad, sure, but Charles Wallace is still stuck with IT, and things are looking bad, like final boss fight gone horribly wrong bad. When we pick up, Meg's just come out of the roughest Tesseract trip ever. Imagine glitching through the map in a game, but instead of respawning, you're left half-frozen in some desolate field. Yeah, that's Meg right now. She's cold, weak, and straight up angry at her dad. And honestly? Fair. This man shows up, gets freed from a glass prison, and then accidentally yeets his daughter into near-death territory. Great parenting, right? But Meg's not just mad because she's freezing, she's mad because he left Charles Wallace behind. Like, bro, you're the adult. Do better. While Meg's dad tries to apologize and explain the whole tessering under pressure thing, Calvin steps up and does what he does best, moral support. He's out here being the team therapist, hyping Meg up, and reminding her that it's not all on her to fix everything. But Meg's not hearing it. She's deep in her feelings, thinking about Charles Wallace, who's still trapped under IT's creepy mind control. And honestly? Same, girl. It's heartbreaking to watch her wrestle with the guilt and helplessness of not being able to save him. Meanwhile, the Mrs. WS pull a classic mentor move and pop in just when things hit rock bottom. They don't come in person, probably off fighting some other intergalactic chaos, but they send in a new character, Ant Beast. Yeah, you heard me right. Ant Beast. She's this giant, fuzzy, tentacle alien who somehow manages to be the most comforting presence in the entire universe. Imagine Totoro, but with an extra dash of cosmic wisdom. Ant Beast takes one look at Meg, all cold and shivering, and is like, let me fix this immediately. She wraps Meg up in warmth, both literally and emotionally, and it's like the hug she didn't know she needed. As Ant Beast heals Meg, there's this whole vibe of quiet understanding. Ant Beast doesn't need explanations, she just knows Meg is carrying a lot of emotional baggage and is like, it's okay to let it out. Meg starts to soften a little, realizing she's not alone in this fight, even though it totally feels like it sometimes. Ant Beast's planet, Ixchel, is nothing like the creepy conformity of Camazotz. It's a peaceful, chill place where no one judges, and everything feels safe. A real vibe shift, if you will. But of course, Meg can't relax for long. She knows Charles Wallace is still out there, and every minute they wait, IT's grip on him gets tighter. She tries to convince her dad to tess her back and save him, but he's like, look, I love you guys, but IT is literally cosmic-level evil. I can't just waltz in there and expect to win. Calvin's on the same page, he's ready to help, but he's also realistic about their chances. And Meg? She's like, cool story, but I'm not leaving my brother behind. This is where the Mrs. WS finally pop back in to drop some truth bombs. They tell Meg straight up that she's the only one who can save Charles Wallace. Why? Because she's connected to him in a way no one else is. They're siblings, and that bond is deeper than anything IT can control. But there's a catch, Meg can't rely on anyone else for this. She has to go back to Camazotz alone. It's a classic hero's journey moment, where the protagonist realizes they're the only one who can finish the quest. Meg's terrified, but she doesn't back down. Even though she's still mad at her dad and still unsure of herself, she knows she has to do this. Ant Beast gives her one last comforting hug, the Mrs. WS give her some cryptic words of encouragement, and then it's go time. The chapter ends with Meg preparing to face IT, knowing full well what's at stake. It's just her love for Charles Wallace, and the hope that she's strong enough to break through IT's control. And honestly, it's a moment. You can feel how scared Meg is, but also how determined. She's not a perfect hero, she's messy and emotional and full of doubts, but that's what makes her so real. She's stepping up not because she thinks she'll win, but because she loves her brother and can't imagine giving up on him. It's the ultimate power of love move, and it's setting up for an epic showdown that's gonna hit you right in the feels. Alright, buckle up, because chapters 11 and 12 of A Wrinkle in Time are the emotional, heart-pounding final levels of this cosmic adventure. Meg's been through it, almost frozen to death, yelled at her dad, and gotten some much-needed TLC from Ant Beast. But now? It's showdown time. No more healing, no more stalling. Meg's diving back into the danger zone of Camazotz to face IT and rescue her little brother, Charles Wallace. The Mrs. WS have set Meg up with the ultimate pep talk, but let's be real, they're still cryptic as ever. They tell her she has a weapon, but instead of spelling it out like normal people, they're all you'll figure it out when you need to. Thanks for the pro tips, queens. So, Meg gets yeeted back into the land of creepy conformity, alone this time, and it's giving major solo dungeon raid vibes. No party, no backup, just her stubbornness, and whatever mystery weapon she's supposed to have. As soon as she lands, Meg's hit with all the bad vibes Camazotz can throw at her. The rhythm from IT is pulsing everywhere, like the world's most cursed bass drop, and it's trying to worm its way into her head. But Meg's not about to fold. She's scared, sure, but she's also laser-focused on saving Charles Wallace. Speaking of, she finds him right where she left him, standing by IT like some kind of creepy brainwashed sidekick. And let me tell you, it is not a good look. Charles Wallace is still deep in IT's control, acting all smug and robotic. He's like, oh, you're back? That's cute. And Meg? She's fuming. This is her baby brother, her weird little genius, and she's not about to let some giant pulsating brain steal him. She tries reasoning with him, shouting at him, even insulting him, but nothing works. IT's hold on Charles Wallace is too strong, and every time Meg pushes, it's like IT is laughing at her. Then, Meg finally sees IT in all its horrifying glory, a giant, gross, pulsating brain sitting in the middle of the room. It's like something out of a sci-fi horror game, and the vibes are all wrong. IT's not just ugly, it's sending out waves of control, trying to pull Meg into its rhythm. She can feel it in her head, like this creepy metronome that won't stop. But instead of giving in, Meg fights back with every ounce of her stubbornness. She's like, not today, Satan. And here's where things get wild. Remember that mystery weapon? Turns out, it's love. Yeah, I know, sounds cheesy, but stick with me. Meg realizes that IT doesn't understand love, it's all about control and domination, but love? That's completely outside its wheelhouse. So Meg zeroes in on her love for Charles Wallace, and she starts pouring all of it into him. She tells him how much she loves him, how much he means to her, and how she knows he's still in there, somewhere, fighting. At first, nothing happens. Charles Wallace is still in full creepy mode, and IT's rhythm is getting louder, trying to drown her out. But Meg doesn't stop. She keeps shouting her love, louder and louder, until finally, Charles Wallace snaps out of it. IT's hold shatters, and he's back to being her weird, wonderful little brother. It's like the ultimate anime redemption arc moment, complete with tears and hugs and all the feels. With Charles Wallace free, IT starts losing its grip on them. The kids grab hands, and suddenly the Mrs. WS swoop in to whisk them away from Camazotz. It's like the ultimate boss battle escape sequence, and honestly, it's a relief. They've done it. They've beaten IT, saved Charles Wallace, and escaped the worst place in the galaxy. When they land back on Earth, it's like waking up from a nightmare. Meg, Calvin, Charles Wallace, and their dad are all safe, standing in the familiar comfort of their backyard. The stars are shining, the world feels normal again, and for the first time in what feels like forever, they can just breathe. Meg's overwhelmed with relief and joy, especially when she sees her mom and the twins running toward them. It's this perfect, tear-jerking reunion moment, and you can't help but feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But what really hits is how much Meg has grown. At the start of the story, she was all self-doubt and insecurity, but now? She's a total boss. She faced down a literal evil brain, saved her brother, and proved that her biggest strength, her love and determination, was enough to win. It's like she leveled up in every possible way, and honestly, it's inspiring. So, that's it. The adventure is over, the universe is safe, for now, and Meg is officially a hero. Sure, she's still got stuff to work through, life isn't perfect, but she's stronger, braver, and more confident than ever. And if that's not the ultimate glow-up, I don't know what is.